Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and instantly command respect, not with loud words or flashy gestures, but with a quiet, unshakable presence? It's as if the air shifts around them, not because they demand it, but because they've mastered something deeper. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, put it simply: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the heart of it, isn't it? Respect isn't something you chase. It's something you cultivate from within. And that's where Stoicism, the ancient philosophy of resilience and clarity, becomes your most powerful ally. Think about the last time you felt unsure in a high-stakes moment, maybe a tough conversation, a career leap, or a personal challenge where you wished you could stand taller, speak clearer, and act with unshakable confidence. What if the secret wasn't in learning new tricks, but in rediscovering timeless principles? This video isn't just about theory, it's about action. We're diving into 28 Stoic formulas, practical, battle-tested strategies that have guided everyone from gladiators to generals, artists to entrepreneurs, to build unbreakable respect and achieve goals that once seemed impossible. These aren't shortcuts, they're transformations. So why does this matter now? Because in a world full of noise, where respect is often confused with attention and success with visibility, Stoicism offers a quieter, deeper path. It's about earning respect by becoming someone worthy of it through discipline, courage, and a mindset that turns obstacles into fuel. Whether you're leading a team, building a legacy, or simply striving to show up as your best self every day, these principles are your blueprint. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand respect, you'll embody it, and that changes everything. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That simple observation holds a profound truth, one the Stoics understood better than most. In a world that rewards constant noise, where opinions are shouted and reactions are instant, silence isn't weakness. It's power. Think of your words as actions, each one carrying weight. Every time you speak, you're either building respect or chipping away at it. The Stoics didn't avoid conversation, they mastered it. They knew that speaking less isn't about holding back. It's about choosing impact over volume. Take Seneca's advice. Speech is the mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so he is. When you listen deeply, you signal strength, not submission. People lean in when you're selective with your words because they sense intention behind them. Consider modern leaders like Warren Buffett, who's known for his deliberate pauses and thoughtful responses. He doesn't fill silence with chatter. He lets his words land with precision. That's how silence commands respect, not by absence, but by presence. Here's a challenge for the next day. Pay attention to how often you speak just to fill space. Notice the urge to interrupt, to correct, to assert. Then ask yourself, would this add value or just noise? The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, pausing before your words leave your mind. Because when you speak less, people remember more. When you listen first, you understand better. And when your words finally come, they carry the weight they deserve. Picture this: Rome, 69 AD, the year of the 4 emperors, a time of chaos where power changed hands violently, and one wrong move could mean death. Amid the bloodshed, the Stoic philosopher Helvidius Priscus stood before Emperor Vespasian, refusing to bow. When threatened with execution, he replied calmly, "Did I ever say I was immortal?" No defiance, no panic, just unflinching truth. That's the power of composure. While others crumbled, the Stoics understood something radical. Emotions aren't commands, they're data. Your anger, your fear, they're signals to process, not scripts to follow. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal during war campaigns, "You own your mind, don't let it own you." He wasn't dismissing emotion, he was mastering it. Think of composure like a tree in a storm. The wind howls, branches shake, but the roots hold firm. That's the difference between reacting and responding. In today's workplace, it might look like a colleague taking credit for your idea, or a client yelling over a missed deadline. The instinct fire back, defend, crumble. The Stoic move, pause, breathe, ask, will losing my temper improve this? Here's the irony. People assume shouting conveys strength, but watch any courtroom, any negotiation, any crisis. Real authority sits with the person who stays cool. A surgeon doesn't panic when the monitor beeps, they adjust. A pilot doesn't scream during turbulence, they correct. Emotional control isn't suppression, it's precision. So think back, when did you last lose composure? Maybe traffic unraveled you, or a careless comment made your pulse spike. Now flip it. What if you'd treated that moment like a Stoic, not as a threat but as training? Every frustration is a rep in the gym of your mind. And just like muscles, composure grows stronger with practice. The next time tension rises, hear Epictetus whispering, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that defines you." Your calm isn't passive, it's your loudest statement of strength. Stoics blame no one. Those 3 words cut through centuries of excuses like a blade. Imagine a world where every setback, every injustice, every unfair twist of fate met not with finger pointing, but with a single question: what's within my power to change? That's the heart of the Stoics' unshakable accountability. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master's cruelty, distilled it into his famous dichotomy. Some things are within our control, others are not. Your opinions, your actions, your desires, these are yours to command. The weather, the past, other people's choices, those belong to the universe. Modern culture thrives on blame, social algorithms feed on outrage, workplaces buzz with gossip, and entire industries profit from convincing us we're victims of circumstance. But here's the paradox: when you blame external forces, you hand them power over your life. The Stoics flipped this script 20 centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire plagued by plague and war, yet his journal repeats one refrain: the obstacle is the way. Not the obstacle is someone else's fault. Consider 2 colleagues passed over for a promotion. One spends weeks dissecting the boss's bias, the other audits their own performance gaps and builds new skills. Both might be right, but only one grows. That's ownership in action. The Stoics didn't deny life's unfairness, they defanged it by focusing on their response. When Seneca lost his wealth, exile, and ultimately his life to Emperor Nero's whims, his letters reveal no bitterness, just relentless focus on what he could still control: his character. So here's the challenge. For the next 24 hours, track every time you're tempted to blame traffic, your upbringing, the system, or bad luck. Then pause, ask Epictetus' question: is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, release it. Ownership isn't about guilt, it's about freedom. Because when you stop wasting energy on what you can't change, you unlock colossal reserves for what you can. Seneca once wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." That simple truth has echoed through the ages because it exposes a myth, the idea that success belongs to those who simply wait for their moment. The Stoics knew better. They practiced something called Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, not to dwell on fear, but to disarm it. By mentally rehearsing challenges beforehand, they transformed uncertainty into clarity and anxiety into action. Imagine standing at the edge of a high dive. The person who hesitates, calculating the drop mid-air, is the one most likely to falter. The diver who's already visualized every motion, the push, the tuck, the entry, steps forward with unshakable calm. That's the power of preparation. Take elite athletes. Before a race, a championship game, or an Olympic event, they don't just warm up their bodies, they rehearse victory in their minds. Michael Phelps' coach had him practice swimming blindfolded, training him to count strokes perfectly in case his goggles failed. When they did fail during the 2008 Beijing Olympics, Phelps didn't panic. He'd already lived that moment 1,000 times in his head. He won gold by 1/100th of a second. That's stoic preparation in action, turning potential disasters into mere steps in a plan you've already mastered. The same principle applies off the field. Think about a job interview, a difficult conversation, or a creative project. The difference between stumbling and soaring often comes down to one question: did you prepare or did you hope? Mental rehearsal isn't about scripting every word. It's about mapping the terrain so you're never caught off guard. Marcus Aurelius spent his mornings visualizing the day's irritations, rude people, distractions, setbacks, not to dwell on negativity, but to ensure they wouldn't derail him. Begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence," he wrote. By expecting challenges, he neutralized their power. So here's the challenge. What's your version of Phelps' blindfold or Marcus' morning ritual? Maybe it's rehearsing a presentation aloud until the words feel natural, or role-playing a tough conversation with a friend. Perhaps it's as simple as taking 5 minutes tonight to visualize tomorrow's biggest task, not just the outcome, but the obstacles and how you'll navigate them. Because when you've already walked through the fire in your mind, the real flames feel like warmth. Preparation doesn't just build skill, it builds the kind of confidence that silences doubt. And that's when luck starts looking a lot like inevitability. The Stoics had a radical idea about what deserves our attention and what doesn't. They called it indifference, but not in the way we might think. This wasn't apathy or detachment. It was a razor-sharp focus on what truly mattered, and a deliberate refusal to let the trivial hijack their peace. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's the heart of Stoic prioritization, recognizing that time is finite, so every moment spent on gossip, petty grievances, or mindless scrolling is a moment stolen from your purpose. Think about the last hour of your day. How much of it was spent on things that, in a year, won't even cross your mind? The coworker's snide comment you replayed in your head, the celebrity drama you scrolled through, the 20 minutes lost arguing online with a stranger. Now imagine if you'd invested that same energy into something meaningful, a skill, a relationship, a quiet moment of reflection. That's the power of indifference. It's not about ignoring life, it's about filtering out the noise so the signal comes through clear. Marcus wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In other words, when someone gossips or tries to drag you into drama, the Stoic response isn't to engage or even to react, it's to rise above. Gossip thrives on attention. Strip it of oxygen and it dies. Social media is the modern arena for this test. Every notification, every outrage cycle, every viral controversy is designed to hook your focus. But here's the question: does reacting to any of it make you stronger, wiser, or more at peace? If not, why hand it your time? Consider the ancient philosopher who, when mocked for ignoring insults, replied, "If someone handed you a gift and you refused it, who does it belong to?" The insult stays with the sender unless you accept it. That's the art of discernment, knowing what to take in and what to let pass. So here's a challenge. Grab a piece of paper and divide it into 2 columns. On one side, list the things that truly move the needle in your life: your health, your growth, the people you love. On the other, jot down the trivialities that somehow consume your mental space: the endless news cycles, the comparison traps, the minor slights you can't shake. Then ask yourself which column is stealing energy from the other, because indifference isn't about not caring. It's about caring so deeply for what matters that everything else fades into the background. And that's how you reclaim your focus, your time, and your power. Cato the Younger, the Roman statesman whose defiance made Julius Caesar hesitate, didn't earn his legendary composure by accident. He practiced something rare: strategic patience. While others rushed to speak first or seize fleeting advantages, Cato would sit silently in Senate debates, sometimes for hours, waiting for the precise moment his words would land like a hammer. "Hurry is only for fools," he'd say. That's the essence of Stoic timing, recognizing that force applied too early is wasted and too late is irrelevant. Nature itself teaches this rhythm. Farmers don't yank crops from the soil because they're eager, they wait for harvest. The Stoics saw patience not as passive waiting, but as active readiness. Consider how often impatience costs us. Ever sent an angry email and instantly regretted it? Pushed a project forward before the team was aligned? In negotiations, this plays out dramatically. A seasoned CEO once shared how silence became his most powerful tool. Facing a hostile takeover bid, he let the other side talk for 45 uninterrupted minutes, counting their own vulnerabilities aloud until they conceded terms far better than his initial target. That's Stoic patience in action, creating space for others to reveal their hand while you hold yours close. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "No one loses another day by delay, they lose it by thinking they've lost it." Modern psychology backs this. Studies on delayed discounting show we undervalue future rewards when anxiety pushes us toward immediate gratification. But the Stoics flipped this impulse on its head. When you pause, whether before a purchase, a confrontation, or a career move, you're not losing time, you're investing in clarity. Think back to your last rushed decision. Maybe it was snapping at a loved one, taking a job that wasn't right, or skipping research on a major purchase. Now imagine if you'd channeled Cato's discipline, breathing through the urgency, asking, "Will acting now improve this or merely satisfy my discomfort?" Strategic patience isn't about inaction, it's about aligning your moves with the tide of circumstances, not against it. Because when you master timing, you don't just avoid mistakes, you turn waiting into leverage. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." At first glance, it sounds almost cruel. Why would hardship be a gift? But the Stoics weren't preaching masochism. They were revealing a universal truth. Pressure doesn't break you, it reveals you. Think of steel forged in fire, or a diamond formed under immense heat and pressure. The very things that feel like they're breaking you are often the forces shaping your unshakable core. Consider the story of Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war for 7 years. Tortured, isolated, with no guarantee of survival, he later credited his endurance to Epictetus' teachings. The obstacle is the way. While others clung to false hope or crumbled under despair, Stockdale did something radical. He used his captivity as a training ground. He practiced Stoic principles in real time, focusing only on what he could control: his thoughts, his dignity, his refusal to let his captors own his mind. When he finally walked free, he didn't emerge broken. He emerged with a clarity that would define the rest of his leadership. That's the alchemy of courage, turning adversity into fuel. Now let's bring this closer to home. You might not be facing prison or war, but what about the layoff that shook your confidence, the health scare that rewrote your future? The rejection that made you question your worth? Here's the Stoic secret. The pain isn't optional, the meaning is. When Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond," he wasn't dismissing your struggle, he was handing you the keys to transform it. Take a moment and think of one challenge you're facing right now, something that feels like a weight on your chest. Now ask yourself, what if this isn't a roadblock but a rite of passage? What if this struggle is the exact training you need for the next chapter of your life? Because history's most respected figures, from Lincoln's depression to Mandela's imprisonment, didn't just endure hardship, they let it sculpt them into people who could bear the weight of greatness. So here's your challenge for the next week. Every time you face a setback, pause and ask, what is this teaching me? How is this preparing me? Not as a platitude, but as a real reframe. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that your growth matters more than your comfort. And that's how you stop surviving adversity and start commanding it. There's a strange magic in the way people who seem to need nothing somehow attract everything: respect, loyalty, even admiration. The Stoics called this self-sufficiency, and it's not about isolation or stubborn independence. It's about building an inner citadel so unshakable that external storms can't breach it. Marcus Aurelius described it best: nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That's the paradox. When you stop leaning on the world for validation or stability, the world starts leaning toward you. Think about the last time you met someone utterly at peace with themselves. No desperate bids for attention, no fragile ego needing constant praise. Their confidence wasn't loud, it was quiet, like gravity. That's the magnetism of emotional independence. Contrast that with modern culture, where we're trained to seek likes, follows, and instant feedback loops just to feel worthy. Social media didn't invent this hunger, it just amplified an ancient human weakness. The Stoics saw this trap 2,000 years ago. Epictetus warned, freedom isn't secured by filling up on your heart's desire, but by removing your desire. Material independence follows the same principle. It's not about rejecting wealth or comfort, it's about refusing to let them define you. Seneca, one of Rome's richest men, slept on a hard bed and ate simple meals periodically to remind himself, I own this, but it doesn't own me. Today, that might look like someone driving a 10-year-old car, not because they can't afford better, but because they've decoupled their self-worth from shiny objects. Or a leader who listens to criticism without crumbling because their sense of value isn't borrowed from others' opinions. So here's the challenge: what dependencies could you reduce? Maybe it's checking your phone for notifications like emotional lifelines, or clinging to a relationship out of fear rather than genuine connection. Perhaps it's the subconscious belief that a bigger title or a fancier home will finally make you feel enough. The Stoic exercise is simple but brutal. Strip away one crutch, just one, and sit with the discomfort until you realize you're still standing. Because the less you need from the world, the more the world will offer. Not because you demanded it, but because you've become someone who deserves it. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, observed something profound about human anatomy. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. This wasn't just a quip about politeness, it was a battle plan for wielding words like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The Stoics revered precision in speech because they understood something modern society often forgets. Every unnecessary word dilutes your power. Epictetus put it bluntly: first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Imagine if we all lived by that standard, how many arguments, misunderstandings, and wasted hours would vanish. Think of the last great speech you heard, maybe a historic address like Churchill's, "We shall fight on the beaches," or a CEO's pivotal announcement. What made it stick? Structure, clarity, economy of language. Churchill didn't ramble. He crafted sentences that landed like hammer strikes. The Stoics would have nodded in approval. Their approach to communication mirrored their approach to life, intentional, disciplined, and stripped of excess. Seneca's letters, for example, are masterclasses in saying more with less. He didn't bury his points in flowery language. He sharpened them until they drew blood with truth. Now contrast that with how most of us communicate today. Endless emails that could have been 3 sentences, meetings that circle for hours without resolution, social media posts bloated with disclaimers and digressions. It's not just inefficient, it erodes respect. When you speak sparingly, people lean in. When you clutter your message, they tune out. Here's the challenge for your next conversation. Apply what the Stoics called the triple filter. Before speaking, ask, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? If it fails even one test, hold your tongue. Better to be silent and thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. And when you do speak, structure your thoughts like a Stoic orator, opening with purpose, building with logic, closing with conviction. Notice how it changes not just how others hear you, but how you hear yourself. Because precision in speech isn't just about communication. It's about reclaiming your time, your focus, and your authority, one deliberate word at a time. What if the secret to unshakable confidence wasn't in fighting reality, but in embracing it completely? The Stoics called this Ammer fati, the love of fate, and it's not passive resignation. It's the ultimate act of power. Imagine standing in a hurricane, not cursing the wind, but adjusting your sails with such precision that the storm becomes your engine. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The oak tree is made stronger by the winds that oppose it." Every setback, every detour, every no you didn't expect isn't an obstacle. It's raw material for a version of yourself you couldn't have built any other way. Consider the executive who spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, only to be laid off abruptly. The easy response, bitterness, panic, endless, why me? Instead, she treated it like Stoic alchemy. She'd always dreamed of starting her own consultancy, but never had the courage to leap. The layoff wasn't the end of her story. It was the push she needed to begin it. Within a year, she was earning more, working less, and finally using skills her old job had suppressed. That's Ammer fati in action, not just enduring fate, but kissing it on the forehead and saying, "I'll make this count." This philosophy flips conventional wisdom on its head. Most people think confidence comes from control, from bending the world to their will. The Stoics knew better. Real confidence springs from knowing that no matter what life throws at you, you'll transmute it into growth. When Marcus faced betrayal, illness, and war, he didn't waste energy wishing things were different. He journaled, "What stands in the way becomes the way. A missed promotion, data to improve, a broken relationship, a lesson in boundaries, even death itself." The final reminder to live fully now. So here's the challenge. What are you resisting right now? Is it a health diagnosis you're refusing to acknowledge fully? A market shift that's rendering your old strategies obsolete? The aging process itself, write it down, then ask the Stoic question. If I stopped fighting this, what opportunities might it reveal? Because acceptance isn't about giving up, it's about gearing up. When you stop wrestling reality, you free up energy to sculpt it, and that's when fate stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you dance with. Seneca once observed, "Character is habit long continued." That simple phrase holds the key to a kind of power most people overlook, not the flashy, dramatic gestures that grab attention, but the quiet, unwavering reliability that earns lasting respect. Think about the people you instinctively trust, the colleague who always meets deadlines without fanfare, the friend who remembers your birthday year after year, the leader whose word feels like concrete. Their authority doesn't come from titles or grand speeches. It's built brick by brick through actions that match their promises day after day. The Stoics didn't just admire consistency, they weaponized it. Epictetus put it bluntly, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In a world where words are cheap and social media rewards performative virtue, this is revolutionary. Real integrity isn't about what you proclaim, it's about what you practice when no one's watching. Consider the Roman general Scipio Africanus, who returned conquered Spanish cities their treasures untouched, not for praise, but because it aligned with his code. Over time, that reputation for fairness made enemies surrender without battle, knowing his terms would be just. That's the multiplier effect of consistency. It compounds trust until it becomes your most valuable currency. Now contrast that with modern behaviors. We live in an era of erratic attention flitting between priorities, rewriting personal values to fit the moment, chasing trends instead of principles. A leader tweets about accountability but shifts blame behind closed doors. A friend preaches loyalty but ghosts plans when something better comes along. These aren't just minor lapses, they're trust erosion in action. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly when Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." B1. He wasn't dismissing reflection, he was demanding alignment between thought and deed. Here's where it gets practical. Consistency isn't about perfection, it's about direction. A small ritual done daily, like morning reflection, a 5-minute skill practice, or keeping one recurring promise to yourself, carries more weight than sporadic grand gestures. Military units understand this deeply. The reason drill sergeants obsess over perfectly made beds or polished boots isn't about the tasks themselves. It's about wiring the mind to execute small disciplines flawlessly, so bigger ones follow. So here's your challenge. Pick one anchor habit, just one, that embodies who you want to become. Maybe it's responding to messages within 24 hours, rain or shine. Or dedicating 10 minutes daily to learning, even when travel or chaos strikes. It could be as simple as never speaking negatively about absent colleagues, no matter the temptation. Then track it for 30 days, not for streaks, but for the quiet transformation Seneca described. As fire tests gold, so daily practice tests the man. Because when your actions become predictable, your influence becomes undeniable, and that's how you turn consistency into your signature. Cicero once told the story of an archer preparing to shoot, a perfect metaphor for how the Stoics approached goals. The archer does everything within his power. He chooses the finest bow, trains his muscles for years, waits for the perfect wind conditions, and aims with unwavering focus. But once the arrow leaves the string, it's no longer his to command. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence, giving your all to the effort while releasing your grip on the outcome. Because here's the truth, you can craft the perfect business plan and still face a market crash. You can raise children with boundless love and still watch them stumble. You can pour your soul into a project and have it ignored. Does that mean you stop aiming? Of course not. It means you redefine success, not by the target you hit, but by the integrity of your shot. Epictetus framed it bluntly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That's the razor's edge between control and concern. Control is choosing your actions, your attitude, your preparation. Concern is clinging to results you can't dictate. Think of a startup founder obsessing over every investor's no, comparing their progress to competitors, measuring their worth by quarterly valuations. Now imagine that same founder shifting to a Stoic mindset, focusing purely on building a product that solves real problems, serving their team with integrity, and adapting to feedback without attaching their self-worth to outcomes. The work doesn't change, the suffering does. Marcus Aurelius captured this in a journal entry. The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path. Then go around. That's all you need to know. No drama, no existential crisis, just clear-eyed adjustment. Modern psychology calls this process orientation, but the Stoics were there first. When Olympic athletes visualize not just the podium but the thousands of training hours beforehand, they're practicing detachment. When a writer submits a manuscript knowing reviews are beyond their control, they're embodying it. So ask yourself, what goals are you clutching too tightly? Is it a number on the scale, a bank balance, a relationship you're trying to force? Now try the Stoic reframe. What if you gave those goals your full effort, then mentally set them free? Not with resignation, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't leased from external validation. Because when you detach from outcomes, you don't lose ambition, you gain freedom. And that's when the arrow often finds its mark. If you don't know what port you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. That ancient seafarer's wisdom cuts to the heart of Stoic intentionality, because purpose isn't just about goals, it's about gravitational pull. Think of the most respected person you know. Chances are they don't just react to life, they move through it with a quiet certainty, as if pulled by some invisible compass. That's the power of clarity. The Stoics didn't just stumble upon this idea, they engineered it. Every morning, Marcus Aurelius would sit with his journal and ask himself two ruthless questions. What is my role today? And what would undermine it? Not vague affirmations, but precise calibrations. He was aligning his compass before the storm of the day could knock it off course. Consider the difference between two leaders in a crisis. One frantically extinguishes fires, pulled in every direction by urgency. The other pauses, revisits their core purpose. Is this moving us toward our mission or just reacting to noise? Then acts with surgical precision. Who commands more respect? Purpose isn't about rigidity, it's about filtration. A CEO who turns down lucrative deals misaligned with their company's values doesn't limit growth, they define it. A parent who says no to overtime to protect family dinners isn't lacking ambition, they're living it. History's most purposeful figures share a habit: ruthless prioritization. Beethoven marked his scores with must and no, not just for music but for his time. He knew creativity required guarding his hours like a fortress. Steve Jobs famously wore the same outfit daily to conserve decision-making energy for what truly mattered. These aren't quirks, they're Stoic practices in modern disguise. When you eliminate the non-essential, every action becomes a declaration of purpose. So here's your challenge tonight. Grab a blank sheet of paper and write at the top, if I could only achieve 3 things before I die, they would be. Not 33, that brutal constraint forces clarity. Then do what Marcus did. Each morning, ask how today's tasks serve those priorities. Because when you move through the world with that kind of clarity, people don't just respect you, they start sailing toward your light. Cato the Younger faced political annihilation with the same expression he wore while reading philosophy: calm, composed, utterly unshaken. When Pompey's forces crushed his bid for consul, his allies panicked, but Cato simply remarked, "The people's eyes see not what is done, but what appears." That's grace under fire, the ability to meet disaster not with hysterics, but with the quiet certainty of a man who knows his character isn't defined by outcomes. The Stoics didn't just admire this quality, they systematized it. Seneca wrote, "Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured." Every time you react instead of respond, you're not just losing the moment, you're eroding your foundation. Picture a seasoned trial lawyer during cross-examination. The opposing counsel throws a curveball accusation, the kind designed to rattle. An amateur might snap back, voice rising, fists tightening, giving the jury exactly what the adversary wants: doubt. But the pro, she pauses, breathes, maybe even smiles. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, she dismantles the attack not with heat, but with ice-cold logic. That's Stoic poise in action. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about channeling it into strategy. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, jotting reminders like, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Think back to your last heated moment, maybe a traffic clash where you yelled, or a work email you fired off in frustration. Now replay it with Cotto's demeanor. What would change? Not the event itself, but your power within it, because grace isn't passive, it's the ultimate flex. When you refuse to let chaos dictate your tempo, you reveal something rare, a mind that can't be hijacked. And that's when respect becomes inevitable. Ancient warriors knew something modern society often forgets: not every hill is worth dying on. The Stoics elevated this battlefield wisdom into a philosophy of energy conservation, teaching that the real art of strength lies not in fighting every fight, but in knowing which ones will make you stronger and which will only leave you drained. Epictetus put it plainly: if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. That's the essence of selective engagement, preserving your finite focus for battles that actually shape your destiny, while letting trivial skirmishes pass like background noise. Imagine two colleagues receiving the same critical email. One fires off a defensive reply, CCs the entire team, and spends the afternoon fuming. The other reads it, asks, will responding elevate this or escalate it? Then closes the tab and returns to their priorities. Both faced the same provocation, but only one walked away with their time, reputation, and peace intact. That's Stoic discernment in action. Modern outrage culture thrives on the opposite instinct, treating every slight as a call to arms, every disagreement as a moral crusade. Social media algorithms reward this, turning petty arguments into public spectacles. But the Stoics measured conflict differently, not by how satisfying it feels in the moment, but by how much it serves your growth in the long run. History's most respected figures mastered this filter. When Mahatma Gandhi was thrown off a train for refusing to leave a whites-only compartment, he didn't lash out at the conductor. He spent the night on the platform, mapping out a movement. The insult became fuel for a revolution, precisely because he didn't waste energy on the small battle when the war demanded his focus. Contrast that with how often we exhaust ourselves debating strangers online, correcting minor slights, or trying to win arguments that change nothing. Here's where it gets practical. Every conflict you engage in has an opportunity cost. The hour spent arguing politics with your uncle is an hour not spent reading, creating, or connecting with someone who shares your vision. The emotional real estate occupied by resentment over a coworker's snide remark is space your next breakthrough could have filled. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery starts with recognizing that some fights shrink you while others build you. So here's your challenge. Identify one battle you're currently fighting. Maybe it's correcting someone's grammar in group chats, obsessing over a competitor's unfair advantage, or defending your choices to people who'll never understand. Now ask the Stoic question: if I let this go today, what could I do with that energy instead? Not every hill is worth your breath, but the ones that are. They'll feel lighter when you're not carrying the weight of unnecessary wars, because true strength isn't about how many fights you can pick, it's about how many you can rise above. Wherever you are, be there completely. That simple command holds the key to a kind of respect no title or status can buy. The Stoics called this presence, and it wasn't some mystical state. It was the art of anchoring your attention so fully in the moment that everything else faded. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Confine yourself to the present, not as a platitude but as a battle tactic, because when you're truly here, not replaying yesterday's mistakes or rehearsing tomorrow's worries, you become a force people can't ignore." Think of the last conversation where you felt truly heard, not just listened to, but absorbed, where the other person's focus was so undivided you could almost feel it. That's Stoic mindfulness in action. Contrast that with modern distractions, the boss scrolling emails during your pitch, the friend nodding while typing a text, the partner half watching a show as you speak. Every fractured glance chips away at trust, but when you offer someone your full attention, you're telegraphing something rare. Right now, nothing matters more than this. That's how presence earns respect, not by demanding it, but by embodying it. Take surgeons in the operating room. Their hands don't tremble because they've banished fear. They steady because every neuron fires toward one incision, one suture, one breath. A study at Stanford found that neurosurgeons enter a state of flow so deep their brain waves resemble monks in meditation. That's the power Marcus described when he wrote, "Give yourself fully to the matter at hand." Whether you're negotiating a contract or reading your child a bedtime story, the principle holds: divided attention dilutes your impact, full concentration amplifies it. Here's the challenge. Pick one routine task today: sipping coffee, walking to your car, washing dishes, and do it with surgical focus. Notice the temperature of the mug, the rhythm of your footsteps, the texture of soap bubbles. Not because these acts are profound, but because training your mind to stay here builds the muscle of presence. Then, in your next conversation, practice what the Stoics called the listening posture: eyes steady, phone away, reactions forming only after the other person's last word. You'll discover what Epictetus knew: we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, because when you master presence, people don't just hear you, they remember you. Epictetus once told his students, "It is impossible to learn what you think you already know." He held up an empty cup and explained, "Only when you pour out the pride can wisdom fill you." That simple image cuts to the bone in today's world, where expertise is often measured in tweet-length hot takes and linked in posturing. The Stoics saw humility not as weakness, but as the sharpest tool for growth, because admitting, "I don't know," isn't surrender, it's the first step toward mastery. Consider two apprentices in the same workshop. One interrupts the master craftsman with, "I've got this," rushing ahead with half-learned techniques. The other watches silently, asks questions, and practices the same joint cut 50 times until their hands ache. A year later, guess whose work commands respect? The paradox is this: confident ignorance shouts while quiet competence echoes. Seneca spent decades studying philosophy, yet wrote, "As long as I live, I'll keep learning how to live." That's the growth mindset in action, treating every day as a classroom, not a coronation. Now contrast that with modern know-it-all culture. Social media rewards certainty over curiosity. Hot takes over deep reflection. We've turned "fake it till you make it" into a career strategy, mistaking confidence for competence. But here's what the Stoics understood: true authority comes from an unquenchable thirst to improve. The Roman general Scipio Africanus, after crushing Carthage, didn't rest on his laurels. He hired Greek tutors to study the culture he'd conquered, knowing understanding his enemy would make him stronger. That's humility as strategy. So here's your challenge. Identify one skill or insight that could make you 10% better at what matters most to you. Maybe it's listening without formulating your reply, or finally learning the basics of accounting to grow your business. It could be as simple as reading one page of philosophy each morning before reaching for your phone. Then do what Seneca did: approach it like a beginner, no matter how advanced you think you are, because the moment you think you've arrived is the moment you stop growing. And the world always notices who's still climbing. There's a quiet power in admitting, I don't have this figured out yet, a kind of courage that doesn't roar but resonates. The Stoics called this the strength of vulnerability, and it's one of their most misunderstood teachings. At first glance, it seems contradictory. How can unshakable resilience coexist with emotional openness? But Marcus Aurelius' private journals reveal the truth. Night after night, he confronted his fears, doubts, and mistakes with brutal honesty, writing, I am made of flaws stitched together with good intentions. That's the paradox. True strength isn't armor, it's the willingness to examine the cracks. Consider a CEO standing before their team after a failed product launch. They could deflect blame, spin the numbers, or disappear into vague corporate jargon. Instead, they say, this is on me, here's where I misjudged the market, and here's how we'll rebuild. That speech doesn't weaken their authority, it deepens it, because vulnerability, when wielded like a Stoic, isn't about oversharing or seeking pity, it's about radical accountability. Seneca put it bluntly, he who admits his ignorance shows it once, he who conceals it shows it often. History's most respected leaders mastered this balance. When Abraham Lincoln lost elections, he published self-deprecating cartoons of his failures before his opponents could. When Eleanor Roosevelt faced public ridicule, she doubled down on her convictions while acknowledging her nerves in her diary. These weren't displays of weakness, they were acts of defiance against the myth of perfection. The Stoics knew that pretending invincibility is exhausting, and worse, it isolates you. Controlled emotional openness, on the other hand, builds bridges. So where could you practice this kind of courage? Maybe it's admitting to your team that a project's timeline was unrealistic, or telling a mentor where you're genuinely stuck instead of nodding along. It might look like saying, I was wrong, without tacking on a but, or sharing a personal story of failure when coaching someone younger. The key is intentionality, vulnerability as strategy, not surrender. Think of it like a tree bending in the wind. Rigidity snaps, flexibility endures. Marcus wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your limitations, when acknowledged, stop being stumbling blocks and start becoming stepping stones. Because when you stop pretending to have all the answers, people start trusting the ones you do. And that's how vulnerability transforms from a liability into your most disarming strength. Imagine a dog straining at its leash, chasing every passing squirrel, every scrap of food, every distraction, exhausted but never satisfied. That's the human mind without restraint, a chain of desires pulling us in endless directions. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus warned, no man is free who is not master of himself, and that mastery begins with the simplest, hardest word, no. Not as deprivation, but as liberation, because every time you refuse one desire, you strengthen your grip on every other. Take money, the most visible test of restraint. Picture two co-workers with identical salaries. One leases a flashy car, upgrades phones yearly, and drowns in credit card debt for designer labels. The other drives a paid-off sedan, invests in low-cost index funds, and wears clothes until they fray. 10 years later, guess who's funding a startup or buying a home debt-free? Financial discipline isn't about poverty, it's about purchasing power over your future. The Stoics called this the wealth of wanting less, and it applies beyond money. Every no to a late-night snack is a yes to morning energy. Every skipped gossip session builds focus for meaningful work. Here's the twist: restraint isn't denial, it's deferred gratification with compound interest. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus captured New Carthage, he walked past rooms of gold to claim just one thing, a library. He knew knowledge outlasts treasure. Modern research confirms this. The famous Stanford marshmallow experiment showed kids who resisted eating one treat now for two later grew into adults with higher SAT scores and lower addiction rates. Delayed gratification isn't just willpower, it's foresight crystallized into habit. So here's your challenge. Pick one arena where desires tug at you: social media scrolling, impulse purchases, interrupting conversations, and impose a 7-day Stoic embargo. Not forever, just long enough to observe the chains loosening. Epictetus advised, fast from complaining for a week, and you'll see how much energy you've been wasting. That's the alchemy of restraint. What feels like losing a pleasure at first becomes gaining clarity, space, and ultimately self-command. Because the fewer leashes pulling you, the farther you can run. When you're staring at a problem that feels overwhelming, a tangled mess of deadlines, emotions, and what-ifs, there's a question the Stoics used like a scalpel. What is this thing in itself? Not what you fear it might become, not what others say it represents, but stripped bare of all assumptions and drama. Marcus Aurelius scribbled this reminder in his journal during wars and plagues. Strip away the legend that encrusts it. He wasn't dismissing challenges, he was decoding them. Think of it like an engineer troubleshooting a broken machine. They don't start by panicking over the cost of replacement parts or blaming the operator. They ask, what's the core function? Where's the first point of failure? That's first principles thinking, breaking complexity into bedrock truths. Take a modern dilemma. You're drowning in work, convinced you need to grind harder. The noise says hustle. Burnout is a badge of honor. Sleep when you're dead. But the Stoic move, strip it down. What's the essential goal? To produce quality output. What's obstructing that? Maybe not hours worked, but fragmented focus. Suddenly, the solution isn't more coffee, it's deleting social media apps during work blocks or delegating tasks that don't require your unique skills. Elon Musk used this exact approach at SpaceX. Instead of accepting the astronomical cost of rockets, he asked, what's a rocket made of? Aluminum, titanium, copper. What's the market price of those materials? Turns out, building one from scratch was 90% cheaper than buying. The problem wasn't rockets, it was unchallenged assumptions. Marcus had a brutal exercise for this. When anxiety struck, he'd dissect it like a scientist. Is this within my control? If not, release it. If yes, what's the next smallest action? No grand theories, no spiraling, just cold, clear taxonomy. A CEO client of mine applied this to a failing product line. Instead of fixating on sunk costs or investor opinions, she asked, what do our customers actually need? The answer wasn't a flashy redesign, it was simplifying the user manual. Sales jumped 30%. Here's your challenge. Grab a current stressor, a relationship tension, a career pivot, a financial squeeze, and attack it like a Stoic engineer. Write it at the top of a blank page. Now ask, what's the irreducible core? List only facts, no interpretations. Then, what's the smallest lever I can pull today? Because clarity isn't about having all the answers. It's about removing everything that isn't the question. And once you see the bones of the problem, the solution often stares back. What if you stood on stage delivering the truth as you see it, and the crowd started booing, not scattered murmurs, but a wall of noise meant to silence you? Your pulse spikes, your palms sweat, the instinct to backtrack claws at your throat. That's the moment. Stoic courage isn't about grand gestures, it's about the mic still in your hand and the choice to speak the next sentence anyway. Because respect isn't measured in applause, it's forged in the willingness to stand alone. Epictetus, who knew the sting of disapproval better than most, put it bluntly, If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, don't make excuses. Reply, he must not know my other vices, or he would have mentioned those too. That's the essence of Stoic independence, treating others' opinions like weather patterns, interesting but never directives. History's most transformative figures were often met with jeers before cheers. Take the whistleblowers who have exposed corporate fraud or government overreach. Their stories share a pattern: first isolation, then outrage, and finally, if the truth prevails, vindication. Consider Sharon Watkins, the Enron executive who alerted her CEO to accounting irregularities. She wasn't hailed as a hero initially, she was sidelined, her career stalled. But Stoicism teaches that conviction outlasts convenience. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss people off." Watkins' courage didn't just expose a scandal, it redefined corporate accountability for a generation. Now turn the lens inward. Where in your life are you trading authenticity for approval? Maybe it's stifling your political views to keep peace at family dinners, or nodding along to a flawed plan at work because dissent feels risky. Perhaps it's the silent compromises, the hobbies abandoned because they're uncool, the clothes you don't wear because they defy trends. The Stoics recognized a paradox: the more you seek validation, the less you're trusted. But when you stop contorting yourself to fit others' expectations, something remarkable happens. You attract people who respect you for what you are, not what you pretend to be. This isn't about contrarianism or picking fights. It's about auditing your choices with brutal honesty. Am I doing this because it's right or because it's safe? The Roman senator Thracia, faced with Emperor Nero's tyranny, didn't stage a futile rebellion. He simply stopped attending Senate meetings where his presence would imply consent. His quiet defiance wasn't loud, but it echoed. So here's the challenge. Identify one arena where you've been playing to the crowd. Maybe it's muting your real opinions on social media, or avoiding a creative project because it doesn't fit your brand. Then channel Epictetus' razor. If you try to be everything to everyone, you'll end up nothing to anyone. The path of unpopular integrity is lonely at first, but it's the only one that leads to self-respect. And ironically, that's what eventually commands the deepest respect from others, because the world doesn't need more echoes. It needs voices clear enough to cut through the noise. Life is the only currency you can't earn back. Every moment spent is gone forever. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They didn't just preach about time, they treated energy, your focus, your attention, your vital force like a finite treasury. Seneca put it bluntly, life is long if you know how to use it, but most of us squander it like reckless heirs, scattering our days across trivial pursuits, distractions, and fake emergencies. Imagine your energy as a stack of gold coins. Would you hand them out to every passing stranger, every petty demand, every buzzing notification? Or would you guard them like a vault, spending only on what truly moves your soul forward? There's a myth that busyness equals productivity. The Stoics saw through this millennia ago. A Roman senator could spend his days attending endless meetings, schmoozing at banquets, and chasing political favors. Or, like Cotto, he could retreat to his study, sharpen his mind with philosophy, and emerge only when his presence would shift the tide. Same hours, vastly different impact. Modern research confirms this. The average knowledge worker spends less than 3 hours a day on deep, meaningful work. The rest, meetings, emails, and the dopamine treadmill of social media. Seneca warned, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. A scattered mind isn't just inefficient, it's bankrupt. Think about your own energy leaks. That 30-minute argument about a parking spot, how many pages could you have read instead? The hour lost doom scrolling, what skill could you have practiced? Even seemingly productive tasks can be traps. Ever spent an afternoon reorganizing your desk to avoid the one report that actually matters? The Stoics called this the deception of activity, a mistaking motion for progress. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal to audit his days, asking, "What did I contribute today that will outlast me? Not how busy was I, but how much did I matter?" Here's the challenge. For the next 3 days, track your energy like a Stoic accountant. Carry a notepad and divide it into 2 columns, investments and leaks. Every hour, jot down what drained you and what fueled you. Was that meeting an investment in your future or just a ritual? Did scrolling through vacation photos restore you or leave you emptier? The goal isn't to eliminate all leisure. Even Seneca enjoyed the theater, but to spend your vitality with intention. Because when you stop pouring energy into black holes, you'll discover reserves you never knew you had. And that's when your life's currency starts buying the things that truly last. Epictetus wasn't joking when he reminded us we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The Stoics saw listening not as passive politeness, but as a strategic superpower, a way to disarm conflicts, uncover truths, and command respect without uttering a word. Think of the last time someone truly heard you, not just waited for their turn to speak, but absorbed your words like dry soil soaks up rain. That's Stoic attention in action, a focused presence so rare it feels like a gift. Active listening isn't nodding while mentally drafting your rebuttal. It's silencing the inner noise to understand before you judge. Epictetus put it bluntly, "We have 2 tasks: to withhold judgment until we comprehend, and to act only when we're certain." Imagine applying that to your next argument. Would the heat fade if you sought first to grasp, not to win? Therapists master this art. Watch how they lean slightly forward, how their hum carries no agenda, how their pauses create space for revelations to surface. They know what the Stoics taught. When you listen deeply, people reveal their fears, their motives, even their solutions. A negotiator friend of mine uses this as his secret weapon. Facing hostile executives, he'll repeat their last 3 words with a questioning tone, so the timeline's unrealistic, and suddenly they're unpacking their own objections. That's the alchemy of attention. It turns monologues into dialogues without force. Here's the challenge. For 1 conversation today, practice silent listening. Not just waiting, but absorbing. When the urge to interrupt rises, hear Epictetus whisper, "Nature gave you 1 tongue but 2 ears. What does that tell you?" Note how often you assume you know where the other person is headed. Notice the details most miss: the slight tremor in their voice when they mention a certain project, the way their eyes flicker when they sidestep a truth. Because mastery here isn't about technique. It's about rewiring your default setting from respond to receive. And when you do speak, your words will land with newfound weight, not because they're louder, but because they're rarer. What if you received a letter today with your exact expiration date, not just the year, but the month, the day, even the hour? How would you rearrange your priorities before the ink dried? The Stoics didn't wait for such a letter. They wrote it themselves every morning. This was memento mori, not some morbid obsession with death, but a life hack for cutting through illusions. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. That's the paradox. Contemplating the end isn't about dying. It's about waking up to how you're living. Consider the clarity that follows a near-death experience. Studies show survivors often report sudden shifts, quitting unfulfilling jobs, repairing broken relationships, dropping trivial grudges. Why wait for the car crash or the heart attack? The Stoics practiced this awareness deliberately. Seneca urged his students to live each day as if it were a complete life, asking, "What would you do differently if this were your last year?" Not to incite panic, but to distill purpose. Imagine applying that lens to your current week. Would you still attend that pointless meeting, or would you finally draft the business plan? Still scroll past your aging parents' calls or press answer every time? Here's the twist: mortality isn't just a deadline, it's a spotlight. When Steve Jobs gave his Stanford commencement speech after being diagnosed with cancer, he didn't dwell on fear. He said, "Death is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new." That's Stoic alchemy, using impermanence as fuel. Ancient Rome's greatest generals kept skulls on their desks not to brood but to remember, this will be you. What legacy survives? So here's your challenge tonight. Pull out a blank sheet and write 2 sentences at the top. If I died tomorrow, what would I regret not doing? And what am I tolerating that's unworthy of my limited days? No abstractions, name names, the toxic friendship you've outgrown, the dream you've deferred for practicality. Then hear Marcus whisper, think of yourself as dead. You've lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. Because the certainty of mortality isn't a threat. It's the only compass that never lies. Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel, once shocked Alexander the Great when the conqueror asked if he could grant him any wish. Diogenes simply replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That moment captures the essence of Stoic simplicity, not as deprivation but as liberation. While Alexander's empire stretched across continents, his desires stretched even farther, leaving him perpetually restless. Diogenes, with nothing but a wooden tub and a leather cloak, radiated a contentment the world's most powerful man envied. That's the paradox the Stoics revealed. The less you need, the more powerful you become. Epictetus drew a line between natural needs, food, shelter, purpose, and artificial ones. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Modern minimalists echo this. When you strip away the clutter of unnecessary desires, you're left with something rare: freedom to move, to choose, to breathe. Think about your own life. How many items in your closet haven't been touched in a year? How many subscriptions drain your account for services you barely use? The average person spends 12 days annually just looking for misplaced items, 12 days that could have been spent creating, connecting, or resting. But simplicity isn't just about physical clutter. It's about mental bandwidth. Every unused app on your phone, every unresolved tension in a relationship, every half-finished project in your workspace isn't just taking up space, it's taking up attention. The Stoics called this the tyranny of the unnecessary. Here's where it gets practical. A study on decision fatigue found that judges were more likely to grant parole after lunch when their mental reserves were replenished. Every trivial choice you make, from picking an outfit to debating which takeout to order, depletes the same cognitive fuel needed for life-altering decisions. Steve Jobs famously wore the same black turtleneck daily, not as a fashion statement, but as a strategy. By eliminating one category of choices, he preserved energy for what truly mattered: building Apple. That's Stoic minimalism in action, designing your environment so the trivial doesn't compete with the essential. So here's your challenge. Identify one excess to eliminate this week. Not forever, just long enough to feel the weight lift. Maybe it's unsubscribing from 5 newsletters that pile up unread, or leaving your phone outside the bedroom to reclaim your mornings. It could be as simple as clearing a single drawer and noticing how the empty space feels like oxygen. Because when you reduce dependence on the non-essential, you don't just declutter your surroundings, you amplify your agency. And that's when you discover what Diogenes knew: real wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you can walk away from. What if you woke up tomorrow to find your bank account emptied, your job gone, or your closest relationship shattered? The Stoics didn't just ponder these scenarios, they rehearsed them. This was premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it wasn't about pessimism, it was about inoculation. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, routinely practiced poverty. He'd dress in rags, sleep on the floor, and eat meager meals, not as self-punishment, but as psychological armor. His logic was razor-sharp. What's the worst that could happen? Now live it voluntarily, and you'll disarm fate's surprises. Modern psychology confirms this. Firefighters don't wait for flames to drill escapes. Surgeons don't encounter their first complication mid-operation. Preparedness isn't fear, it's freedom. Consider how airlines brief passengers on emergency procedures before takeoff. They don't dwell on crash statistics, they normalize readiness. When turbulence hits, those who have mentally rehearsed stay calmer, move faster, and help others. The Stoics applied this same principle to life's turbulence. Marcus Aurelius would begin his mornings visualizing the day's potential irritations, traffic, rude colleagues, setbacks, not to dwell in dread, but to drain those events of their power to derail him. By asking, what if, he wasn't summoning doom, he was scripting his response. Modern CEOs use similar tactics. Before high-stakes negotiations, they role-play brutal objections, not to expect failure, but to ensure no reaction catches them off guard. Here's the alchemy. When you pre-rehearse adversity, you transform anxiety into agency. A study on anxiety patients found that those who wrote detailed accounts of their worst-case scenarios, not vague worries, but step-by-step narratives, experienced a 30% drop in stress hormones. The brain registers rehearsed challenges as familiar territory, reducing their emotional charge. That's why Navy SEAL train in freezing water and sleep deprivation. When real missions hit, their bodies recognize the strain as practice rather than panic. So here's your challenge tonight. Pick one fear lurking in your mental shadows: a career setback, a health scare, a betrayal. Now channel Seneca. Write the full script. What exactly would happen? How would you adapt? What resources would remain, not as a victim but as a strategist? When you've finished, sit with this truth. You've already survived the worst in your mind. The real event, if it comes, will just be a rerun. And that's how anticipation becomes resilience, not by avoiding storms, but by learning to dance in the rain long before the first drop falls. There's a silent revolution happening in the way we think about respect, not as something you earn from others, but as the natural result of a life lived in perfect alignment. The Stoics called this integrity of alignment, and it's not about grand gestures or public displays. It's the quiet discipline of making sure your thoughts, words, and actions form an unbroken chain. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts and the harmony between what you believe and what you do. That's the secret. When you stop splitting yourself into pieces, saying one thing in the boardroom and another in the bedroom, preaching principles you don't practice, you become a force people can't ignore. Think of a leader you'd follow anywhere. Chances are their power doesn't come from charisma alone, but from something deeper, a consistency that makes their yes mean yes and their no mean no. Take Abraham Lincoln, who refused to compromise on emancipation even when advisors warned it would cost him re-election. Or modern executives like Satya Nadella, who transformed Microsoft's culture by aligning every decision, from product design to performance reviews, with a single principle: we need to be learners in all things. That's Stoic congruence in action. It's not about being perfect, it's about being whole. When your inner compass points true north, every step you take moves you forward, even the stumbles. Here's where most of us get tripped up. We treat integrity like a switch we flip for big moments, rather than the wiring behind every choice. You might champion honesty in your team meetings but fudge numbers on your fitness app. Or advocate for patience with your kids while raging at slow drivers. The Stoics saw these tiny fractures as leaks in your reservoir of self-respect. Epictetus warned, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Because every time your actions contradict your beliefs, you're not just confusing others, you're eroding trust in yourself. Try this exercise. Pick one area where your thoughts and actions diverge. Maybe it's complaining about burnout while secretly priding yourself on sleepless hustle, or advocating for sustainability while impulse buying fast fashion. Don't judge it, just spotlight it, then ask Marcus's favorite question. What's the cost of this misalignment? Not in grand terms, but in tiny withdrawals from your self-trust bank. Because integrity isn't built in heroic leaps, but in the daily practice of closing the gap between who you are and who you aspire to be, and when those two finally meet. That's when respect becomes not something you seek, but something you simply are. A stonecutter doesn't swing once and expect the boulder to split. They strike again and again in the same spot, trusting that each small impact accumulates into a fracture. That's Stoic incrementalism, the quiet art of letting minor, daily victories compound into unshakable momentum. Epictetus captured it perfectly. No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Most people abandon their goals not because they lack vision, but because they undervalue the patience required to let effort ripen. Consider fitness. You wouldn't expect a single workout to transform your body. Yet how often do we apply that same unrealistic expectation to our careers, relationships, or personal growth? The magic lies in the ritual, not the rarity. A study of habit formation at University College London found it takes an average of 66 days for a behavior to become automatic. Not 6 days of heroic effort, but 66 days of showing up even when progress feels invisible. The Stoics didn't wait for motivation. They engineered discipline through micro-commitments. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not in grand proclamations, but in stolen moments between battles, a sentence at a time. Here's the paradox of small wins. They feel insignificant in the moment, but create irreversible momentum over time. A writer drafting just 200 words daily finishes a novel in a year. A saver investing the cost of a daily coffee retires with millions. A leader who spends 10 minutes each morning reflecting on their principles builds a reputation for wisdom that outshouts any motivational speech. The key is consistency, not scale. So here's your challenge. Pick one practice, just one, that aligns with your deepest goal. Maybe it's journaling 3 sentences before bed, walking 15 minutes at lunch, or reading 1 page of philosophy with your morning coffee. Don't optimize for speed, optimize for showing up. Track it for 30 days, not with streaks or gold stars, but with the quiet certainty of a stonecutter. Because the Stoics knew something modern hustle culture forgets. Rivers carve canyons not by force, but by persistence. And every small, steady step forward is a chisel strike against the resistance of the world. These 28 Stoic formulas aren't isolated tactics, they're the interlocking gears of a single machine, each one turning the next to build unshakable respect and unstoppable momentum. Think of them like a blacksmith's tools. The hammer of discipline shapes the blade of courage, which is sharpened by the whetstone of humility and tempered in the fire of adversity. What makes Stoicism timeless isn't the complexity of its ideas, but the raw practicality of its application. This isn't philosophy to be debated in ivory towers. It's a workshop manual for the soul, tested in the grit of daily life, from ancient battlefields to modern boardrooms. Marcus Aurelius left us a final clue to this system's power. In his last known journal entry, he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That's the heartbeat of Stoicism: action over analysis, character over credentials. Whether it's the silent strength of selective engagement, the transformative honesty of vulnerability, or the relentless focus of incremental progress, every formula shares one truth: respect isn't taken, it's cultivated. Achievement isn't stumbled upon, it's architected. So here's where we turn wisdom into work. Don't try to master all 28 principles at once. That's the mistake of the impatient. Instead, pick just one, the one that buzzed in your chest as you listened. Maybe it's the courage to embrace your next challenge with Ammer, or the discipline to silence your phone and practice undivided presence at dinner tonight. It could be as simple as writing your own memento mori reminder on a sticky note. Is this how I'd spend my last year? Then act, not tomorrow, today. The Stoics didn't measure progress in grand declarations, but in daily repetitions. Like a sculptor chiseling a masterpiece, your life becomes a work of art, one deliberate strike at a time. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, which formula will you wield first? Because the world doesn't need more spectators of wisdom, it needs doers. And if history teaches us anything, it's this: the most respected people in any era weren't those who knew the most, but those who lived what they knew. Your legacy starts with the next choice. Make it Stoic.